Multiple things to say before I really get into today's video, and that is one, I cannot see the camera because I don't have my glasses on, because I already thought like I looked too much like a teacher or a principal in this outfit. The glasses just would have made it 100 times worse. Hello everybody. I love the end/beginnings of any year. And what I love about specifically the book community in the end/beginning of any year are the videos that you see of people's favorites, least favorites, like all of these roundups. Feels so awkward for some reason just trying to talk. So I thought before I share my top 24 books of 2024 with you guys, which will be one of the next videos, I thought that I would share with you books that didn't make that list, but I still feel like should be discussed on the channel, because I feel like the list was really hard. Like once I got down to it, I kind of looked at like, 5 stars, like 4.5 stars, and I was like, okay, these, but then there were so many books that popped up on the list that I was like, oh, they deserve a spot, but they're not quite there. But I kind of wanted to make a video on my favorite books that didn't make that top spot. I've been trying to wait like as long as possible to film this video, because also if you guys are real ones and have been here for a while, you guys may notice the background of this video. I'm back at my parents' house, staying at my parents' house, and the road not taking looks real good now. I have filmed Vlogmas videos. No, I have filmed bookmas videos and stuff, and I've just been waiting like as long as I can before making like any of my favorites videos, because I'm so terrified that like I'm going to have like a new absolute favorite that I'm just not going to be able to talk about. So all of the books that I'm going to be talking about in today's video, I put them all under honorable mentions in my top 24 of 2024. I'm gonna start off, I think I was starting this off by like how I read them, I don't know. Actually, this kind of gets a little all over the place. First one on this list is going to be Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book I read in the first month of the year. I guess none of us knew that it was the first month of the year. Anyhow, sorry, this video is off to a great start. I really liked this book, and when I went back on my list for this year, this one was very close to making the top 24. I just feel like the plot in the messaging of this book are just genius, and I actually recently just read another book by her as well, and I just felt the same exact way in that piece of work, where I was like, I just feel like it's so thought out and everything is so purposeful, and even just the lines and messaging that are just so in your face, like the messaging is right there, you can't miss it. It's just so good. Yellowface, we're following our main character. The name is escaping me at the moment. One moment. Juniper, I think we call her June in the book. She is friends with Athena, who is a very successful writer within her own right. And June is friends with Athena, but she's also very, like you can tell, very jealous, envious of Athena and her success. She witnesses Athena's death one night, and in the midst of that, steals one of Athena's pieces of work that she was working on, and then passes it off as her own work. Now, this itself is just such a wild thing to do, and seeing our main character June just go through this almost like method of madness, and just like you are watching these awful decisions that she is making, and she's not a good person, but just watching this unravel in the storyline and the different things we learn, what we have to say about the literary world and commentary on like readers and writers and reviewers and so many different things within this book, I just really enjoyed. And also I do feel like it is a talent for an author to write just such a like in your face awful character that nobody will, like, but still make reading a story in their point of view enjoyable. Like that, I feel like it has to have some talent, because one of my main critiques is if I don't like a main character, obviously you don't want to live inside of their head for a whole entire book. So it takes talent to write a story about somebody who is just so in your face, such a negative person, you're just watching with your jaw on the floor of the decisions that this person is making. Kind of this descend into madness. It's honestly such an intriguing and important read, so definitely one of my favorites of the year. Next up, I have 5 Survive. Now, we all know Holly Black and Holly Jackson. I always get, like, I interchangeably mess up both of those, so I really hope that this is correct off the top of my head. Also, I'm just filming these videos with no books on hand, so usually I would have the book to look at. 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. This was one that I put off for a little bit because obviously A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy is like her famous work, and everybody really loves that series. It recently just got turned into a TV show, which I still have not watched yet. This was my first dive into something that wasn't that series of hers, so I put it off for a little bit. I read this book in one sitting and loved it. Something that I love about Holly Jackson, because especially if you guys have been watching my videos, and I've kind of been saying, I've been feeling this way for a while, where I feel like I'm aging out of like young adult, whereas for the past like 2.5 years of my reading, I've really enjoyed picking up young adult, like romances and thrillers, and fantasy still holds true for me, but with like romances and fiction and thrillers, I feel like aged out of it a little bit. But what I like about Holly Jackson is that she kind of toes that line of kind of adult and young adult, where like the things that she does and pulls in her books, it's not like extremely like G-rated, I guess is what I would say. So it doesn't feel like you're really reading a young adult thriller, which I do enjoy. And with this one, the setting of just like a group of friends being stuck in this RV because they're going to, is it North Carolina? They're going somewhere for spring break, and they are all traveling in this RV together, and basically they break down, and there's this like assassin type person, and they cannot leave the RV, and they're trying to like get out and escape some way, but obviously like phones aren't working, nothing is working, so they're trying to figure out a solution for this. And the tension of that type of plot, I just really liked, like the being stuck in one location. Like another type of thriller that I've read that's like that is No Exit by Taylor Adams, which I love this one. I always recommend this one for a winter thriller because it's that like stuck in one location, how am I going to get out of this situation type thing. And again, some of the things that Holly Jackson pulls in the book, you're kind of like, wow, I can't believe she did that. And with Holly Jackson's books, they all kind of end like there's an ending, but it's a little open always. Next up, we have Bridge Kingdom. Now, I think this one, is this one? Yeah, I think this one's like getting traditionally published in new covers. I'm pretty sure I just saw like a new cover for these first 2 books in store the other day, which I actually really love. Bridge Kingdom, I read this also earlier on in the year, and I remember like the last 15-ish% of this book, I literally like sat up. I don't know what reading vlog I read it in, but I think there is a clip of me reading this book in a reading vlog, and you literally see me like I'm sitting up on the edge of the bed, like literally on the edge of my seat. This one is your good old like enemies to lovers. Basically, our female main character was raised in the like opposite kingdom. I'm saying this from my memory, by the way. She was raised in this like opposite kingdom, and she has a bunch of sisters, and she was raised to like kill this other king eventually. And basically it was a competition like within all of her sisters of who was going to like be the one to like, you know, have to marry this guy, and eventually like, you know, basically you're following this storyline of her being this like spy for her father. And it's just so interesting the way that the cookie crumbles with this one. I still haven't read the next book in the series. The series is a little confusing to me because the second book still follows the same 2 people. Then there's 2 other ones, and I feel like it follows other people. And I don't know, like when we switch those point of views in the middle of the series, I don't know. Next up, we have The Romcommers by Catherine Center. Me and Catherine Center, I feel like I do really enjoy her books. The Romcommers, though, is the first one that I feel like I really, really, really enjoyed. I really enjoyed The Bodyguard. This one I enjoyed a little bit more. Her other ones have been a little bit hit or miss with me, but this one was a new release this year, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like it felt very realistic. Also, I feel like her storylines and characters are just so unique in my brain, like the way that story goes about. Basically, is it a screenplay or is it a book? I think they're screenplays, and it's our male main character is this like prestigious guy who like writes these screenplays, and then you have our female main character who has never been able to like kind of get one off the ground. She writes them and they never really take off, and she's really wanted to. She is in this like hard spot at the time, and then her manager is like, hey, if you help this guy write a rom-com, because like the studio, I think it's like the studio asked for a rom-com and he needs help doing it to get this like other project off the ground. And so she agrees. They go into this kind of like partnership together. It's like close proximity because she's staying in his house and trying to help him, but he doesn't really like want the help. He's kind of like that kind of shut down, shut out type of guy. But it's very interesting to see that dynamic because she's more of kind of like a in your face type of person. So I always think that dynamic is very interesting in books. And in this one, I really liked it. I love the love proclamation in Catherine Center's books because they're always so high stakes and just funny for no reason. Like the way that she chooses to like put these characters to tell each other their feelings is just so silly, but I love it so much. Her books do literally feel like a rom-com, and this one had some emotional depth to it. I do feel like most of her books though have this like emotional punch of a side plot. Next up we have Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher. I really enjoy this new series that she has going on. Honestly, I do really enjoy pretty much all of Lauren Asher's books, and I really enjoyed the first one, which was, I think, Love Redesigned. This one was Love Unwritten. Basically, our female main character is the nanny for our male main character, and she like takes care of his son. It's a very interesting dynamic, especially because like she has a lot of things that have went on. Like she loves songwriting, but she has this like kind of traumatic things that have happened to her. She's been burned by people in the past, so she's not very trustworthy. She definitely has her not that she's not trustworthy. She finds trust hard to give to other people, and she's very guarded. And then our male main character, he's kind of the same way. So you kind of have two sides of the same coin. It was very interesting also because this book is long. Like if you like books that are pretty much just watching the characters live life and fall in love, like there's not really a plot other than it's like, oh, she's the nanny. Like you can say there's like a loose plot. I think they have to go on the vacation together, I think is the plot that is thrown out in this book. But honestly, there's so much more going on in the book other than that. But it is just more of that like two characters living life type of thing. I just really liked it. I thought that the kid thrown in there was cute, and that dynamic on top of everything was cute, and I like the way that the guards kind of fall down for both characters in different ways. Next up, we're switching genres. We Used to Live Here. This was the, second horror book that I had read this year, and if you've been following along for that journey of my reading this year, I've been wanting to get more into horror, and this was my first like real dive into it. This is my vibe of horror. We have our female main character, and she has recently just moved into this house with her partner, and both of them kind of renovate these houses and live in them and then sell them and then kind of move, from what I remember. And they're in this new house that they have decided to renovate. It's a little creepy. It's very isolated. It's in these like woodsy town. The houses are very spaced apart. Her partner goes out one day and I think picking up dinner or something like that. And so she's at the house by herself and she hears a knock on the door, and there's this family on her doorstep, and the father's like, hi, we used to live here. Do you mind if we come in for like 10 minutes so I can show the kids around? And something that you learn very quickly off the bat is that our female main character is a kind of like people pleaser type, so she lets them in. I know any of us, we're all rolling our eyes, grabbing our hair, going, why? And that's the story that you're following. And honestly, I don't think anybody could, maybe you could, but I don't think anybody could guess kind of what is going to happen from there on out. It was so eerie and spooky, and I loved every single part of it. Honestly, I read this in the summertime. I would really recommend it for the wintertime because I think it takes place during the winter, because I remember this one scene that is described as like she goes out with her dog and she's kind of trekking through the snow, and it kind of gives you that same isolated feel because it takes place at this house. It's just so like you almost feel like your mind is like melting almost. You're like, what is happening? Like you can't even trust your own instincts as to what is happening, and I love that type of book and horror genre. So We Used to Live Here. I really, really enjoyed this one, and I think I remember it being like our author, they wrote it on Reddit, and they took it from Reddit onto like making it a book. And also there's like these chapters in between where it's like Morse code and like these different little symbols written down, which I never really figured out, but I thought that was like a nice little part into it. There's like little breaks in chapters where we add something like that in, which I thought was also very interesting. Next up, honestly, I did not expect to have this book on one of my top favorites of the year, which was Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I knew that people were very excited about the new Sally Rooney coming out, and honestly, my history with Sally Rooney is very rocky. I feel like I like some of the books, I don't like some of the books. I recently reread Normal People this year, and I'm sorry that I bring this up every single time that I bring up Sally Rooney, but it just was very jarring to me because I read Normal People when I was like in high school. With Intermezzo, you're following two brothers. One of them is this like professional chess player. He's the younger brother. The older brother is this lawyer. You're following their two separate plot lines and also their life because they both have recently just lost their father. So how these two brothers are grieving that differently, and also how they are looking for love in different ways, and how them as people are just completely different. So we have Peter, who's the lawyer, and Ivan, who is the competitive chess player. And I just really fell for Ivan as a character. I think I said this originally when I talked about this in a wrap up, in that I really saw myself a lot in Ivan because the way that he even just like communicates, especially listening to the audiobook, I was like, wow, this is kind of painful because this is definitely what half of my conversations with people are like. Like the one example that I always use is he's talking to this woman and he's just like, she asks a question and he's like telling her something about himself. And as he goes to like explain it, he's talking and then he goes, I know you don't care, but, and I know it's not interesting, but, and even just the way that he like overthinks things, like another example that I used that just stuck to my brain was like, she calls him for the first time and he stares at the phone like on the charger, ringing. And he's like debating on picking it up because he's thinking about like how long the phone's been on the charger, and then like having to tell her that he didn't pick up the phone because it was on the charger, and that thought process. And then he picks up the phone and tells her these things. That is literally my internal thinking. So a lot of how he was like communicating and overthinking and what that looked like within his conversations was very, very relatable to me, to a point where I was like, wow, like I have never seen like genuinely actual real conversation like this played out on page. Because another thing about Sally Rooney's writing is that these characters just feel very, very real, even within their flaws. Their flaws and emotions is what makes them feel so human as like you're reading it on the page. And that's what I really enjoy about Sally Rooney's writing, is because it just feels very realistic. So to see that like relatable nature be played out on page, but it just feels so real to me, is another reason that I really liked it. But I also liked exploring the dynamic between the two brothers. I also just feel like there was so much sibling commentary, because one of the things I feel like is that there's this like tension between the brothers, obviously because Peter is older, Ivan is younger, and things like about growing up and like that with parents, and how that dynamic looks of like your relationship with another parent, and also just your relationship with each other. As like, I think one example is like Peter goes off to college and kind of what that relationship started to look like with him and Ivan, because Peter started going through things that Ivan didn't know about, but to Ivan it just seemed like Peter just became this completely different person and was hard to like kind of acknowledge and have a relationship with, and what that dynamic looks like because of it years later, and how we explore how we move on as we get older, and siblings, and just kind of remembering that like you are living your life, especially as a younger sibling. And maybe that's why I loved it so much, is because I related to Ivan so much as a younger sibling and what that looks like as your relationships with older siblings. It was just a very interesting, I feel like also just, I feel like maybe more of a personal thing of why I really enjoyed Intermezzo, but obviously, it made it to my favorites list. I really enjoyed it. Next up, honestly, I just really enjoyed this one, and that is City of Gods and Monsters. This one I found because of the fan art, and also people were like, oh, it's very like Crescent City, which if you watch me read this in a reading vlog, I'm trying to remember, it was like a very recent reading vlog on my channel, and I was like, yeah, I can definitely see it's different from Crescent City, but it is very similar. So honestly, if you really enjoyed Crescent City and you've been looking for a vibe of that kind of, oh my gosh, there's a name for it and I am blanking on it. There's a name for the type of urban fantasy where it takes place like kind of real world-esque, like there's modern technology and phones and all of that. Honestly, it was like a Wattpad version of Crescent City, and I ate it up. Genuinely loved it and had such a good time. It was like a over 700 page book. I ate it up. I literally was like you know what, this isn't like the best thing I've ever read, but I enjoyed it so much. And I compare it to Wattpad, and I mean it in the way of like, you know, when you would stay up late at night because that Wattpad story was just so good. Like, that's what it was giving. Like, it was giving that type of vibe. The plot of this book is like, our main character is a human girl, and she is surrounded by like these different like werewolves, vampires, demons, I think is what some of them are, right? I don't know. I'm blanking. Witches. It's actually a very big point in the book. I think they're witches. I think like they have magic. She is the human in all of this, and she basically, our male main character, because it's dual POV, our male main character, he is hired, like oh gosh, his group is called something, and they basically are hired to like kill people. And he is hired by this random person, and they're like, hey, you need to like kill this girl. Wow, sorry, the way I'm just like throwing this out there, it's like so serious, and I'm gonna be like, it was so good, right? Anyway, and basically there's this thing about like auras, like everybody has an aura, and usually the people that he is called to like kill or have a hit out on, they have these like dark auras, but hers is like this like bright, she's just so innocent. And so he's like, I can't kill this girl. And so then he decides to instead take her in and get to the bottom of like why somebody wants to kill her. And that's kind of what you're going through. There's also like so many different things going on. This book was a wild ride, and kind of it did remind me of the Sarah J. Maas book, because especially Crescent City, not even just because it was similar in kind of setting and everything, but also because the end of this book, like any Sarah J. Maas, if you've ever read a Sarah J. Maas book, sometimes if you feel like the book is kind of to a slow start or in the middle, get to the end of that book, stuff starts happening out of nowhere, and that's what started happening with this book as well. So thought that was interesting, but honestly I just really liked it. Complete 180. We have one of my favorite nonfiction reads of the year, which was Beautiful Boy. I had watched the movie previously, like a few years ago. It's a movie with Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Both of them do an exquisite job of showcasing it. Basically, if you guys don't know, this is a story from the dad's point of view of his son's addiction and what that looked like as a parent, trying to be very active and helpful, and tried to take on like how to help his son through this addiction. And the movie, I feel like, is beautiful, and it makes me sob every single time I watch it. I literally could start crying, and I do have tears building up in my eyes just thinking about it, because even the book, I feel like the book is better, and it goes into a lot more detail, and I literally cried reading the book. It's just such a heart-wrenching story of watching and reading this dad's point of view of the parent side of trying to help and love somebody through their addiction, and what that looks like a span of years, and the ups and downs, and the reality of what that looks like. And also, I know I haven't read it yet, but the son has came out with his own book now of like his addiction and what that looked like for him through these moments, which I do want to read, and I do want to read that next year, because I also think it is very important to also be reading his point of view, parent point of view of it. It's just so hard hitting, and when you read the story, you feel for both the father and son. Like, even though it's from the father's point of view, you can sympathize through the father's lens of the son, because the father is coming at it from like a loving angle. Like, he's never just straight up like reprimanding his son. I feel like it's from a very understanding, and also even just like research that he puts in of his own time of like how he was trying to understand his son. It's such a beautiful story, and I really wish everybody would read it. Next up, I read it in the same video, but Rebecca. This was the one and only classic that I read this year. I literally had a reading goal of 10, and I read one. And this one, I was really motivated to read, because it is what Taylor Swift says Tolerate It is inspired by. Our main character gets married to this man, and they go to his manor mansion. And I said before, the mansion has a name. I am forgetting it at this very moment. Manderly is the estate's name, and it's a very like gothic type of vibe. It's like on the sea. You kind of get these very like, what do you want to say? it really immerses you into the setting of this book. And I said, Manderly feels like its own character so much throughout the story. So you have our main character, and she's kind of like in this marriage that's very odd with this man because he doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to her. She basically starts kind of getting haunted by the ghost of his ex-wife, Rebecca. And you're following that story, and it's just such an interesting plot. It feels like you're falling down the rabbit hole. It did get me motivated to want to read more classics because I do find classics very intimidating because I have not read a classic since high school. This one I feel like is a really good start for somebody trying to get back into reading them. And I really liked it. I liked the setting. I liked the descriptions of Manderly. I liked the descriptions of their relationship and kind of this, again, fall into madness and these different characters that you just are like, what is going on with them? It's like a mystery at the same time, and it's so atmospheric as well. I just feel like it's such a good book. Obviously, it's a classic. Next up, I have another nonfiction book, which is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I did not expect to like this as much as I did. I really enjoy Matthew McConaughey movies, and that's why I picked this up, because if I really like somebody within their own work, for example, right now I'm listening to Viola Davis's memoir. When I really love an actor or actress or artist or anybody, I really like listening to them talk about their life. So I did this with Matthew McConaughey's memoir. He speaks about his life, but then there are these little parts where he does poetry, or even he calls them green light moments, where he kind of takes maybe a story that he just told you and tells you how that turned into a green light moment for him. I feel like there were honestly a lot of takeaways from the book, which is why I really, really enjoyed it. But also I would step away from the memoir and I would go and tell other people about what he was talking about. It was one that I wanted to talk about with people. And for nonfiction with me, I know it's a really good one that I like if I have to go and tell somebody what I was reading about. Okay, I'm ending this one off with another romance book that I actually recently read, which is Not Another Love Song. I did not expect to like this one as much as I did. Something that really sticks out to me is the male main character in this book, but to rewind a little bit, our female and male main character both play in this same orchestra, but our male main character has his own successful music career separated from the orchestra, but our female main character doesn't, and it's her dream to have his type of career, and she's a very big fan of him, but he's not very aware of her. The unraveling of their relationship, I just really liked learning stuff about him and then seeing in his point of view things that he notices about her. And I talked about this in the video where I read it, which was the first video of bookmas, if you missed it. He kind of is a very blunt person, and he just kind of says what he thinks, and also the things that he notices about people in his inner monologue is the same way, where it's not necessarily mean or egotistical. It's just the way that his mind works, especially around music, because they are obviously very musically inclined people. And something that I think I realized in this one is that I love bookish people. When you write about two bookish people, I eat it up every time, especially Emily Henry. I think I really like two musical people as well, because it gives me the same vibe as two bookish people, because the writing, yearning, and love between the characters just feels so poetic and beautiful, and I really like that, and that's how I felt in this book. Just the angst between the two characters, also the way that he kind of it's more of a she's aware of him, but then he falls first and harder type of thing. It literally had me giggling out loud. I was literally down bad over words on a paper, and it's very, very, very hard to, come to terms with the fact that you're doing that. Those are all of my favorite books that did not make it to the top 24 of 2024 list. I just felt like they deserved their own video because I still really love them and really want to gush about these books openly, because I just really, really love them. But you guys will see my top 24 of 2024 here in a day or two. I feel like that one is the list though. It's I rank them and it's this is my definite favorites of the year, especially when you get down to that top 10. So I'm very excited for you guys to see that video, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Nevertheless, I really like sitting down and actually talking positively about things that I really, really enjoy and like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, maybe got some book recommendations from it. Also, I hope you guys have been enjoying bookmas so far. A lot of what you guys have been seeing has been pre-filmed, so I could have just a little bit of sanity, just a scrap of it while doing all of this. So this is the first time I'm kind of speaking to you guys in more real time. So I hope you guys are enjoying so far, and I will be seeing you for a few more days. And so with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Do what you know what to do with that YouTube stuff. Keep up with me anywhere else, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when I see ya. Peace.